Hello, I am Eeshan Hasan, and this is a pre-recorded presentation for the 2021 conference of the Society of Mathematical Psychology. Today, I'll be talking about improving medical image decision making by leveraging representational similarity. This is a joint work with Jennifer Trueblood, Quentin Eichabum, Seegmiller and Charles Stratton from Vanderbilt University and Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Medical images are quite ubiquitous. We have MRIs, X-rays, mammograms, and white blood cells. It is based on the interpretations of these images that diseases are identified and treated. Despite our best efforts, mistakes are made in the identification and interpretation of these images. In this talk, we'll consider hybrid approaches to medical decision making to improve performance. So we've got humans and we've got machines. Humans are noisy decision makers while machines are systematic. Humans are expensive and machines are cheaper. Humans can be trained with less data and machines need a lot more data. So the question is, how do we effectively combine these two different machines and improve decision making? So the task that we'll be doing in our experiments is cancer cell identification. This is a cell, a white blood cell, a stained white blood cell. On looking at such an image, one can ask the question, is this a blast cell? The ground truth of these images was provided by a hematopathologist at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. We use images such as these to conduct experiments, and it is based on the decisions made in these experiments that we base our findings. So the decision data sets use both novice and expert participants. Novice participants are undergraduate participants at Vanderbilt University, and expert participants are laboratory professionals from Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Both set of participants went through a brief training phase before doing the task. And this data set was originally used to study the impact of prevalence on medical image decision making. So we've got experiment 1A and 1B with novice participants and experiment 2 with expert participants. While we vary the prevalence within these data sets, for our task, we only look at that part of the experiment that uses 50% prevalence. So we'll be interested in comparing novices and experts. Similarity. With medical images, we have this added power of looking at whether two images are similar to each other or not. These are, for example, pairs of images that, to a naive observer, seem similar. Similarity-based aggregation is based on the idea that decisions on similar cells can be aggregated together to form a more accurate final decision. So we've got a decision maker who's made a decision on this image. However, on similar images, the decision is different from the decision made on that cell. So the final decision on that cell might actually change based on the decisions on the similar images. And the question is, does this improve accuracy? But this has two sub-questions. One question is, how do we know if two images are similar? What is similarity? The second question is, how many decisions do we aggregate? So the first question is interesting, and we use neural networks to actually try and answer it. So this is a Google net that's been trained on ImageNet, and it generally knows how to identify dogs and cats and chairs and everyday objects. So if we send in a dog through an image through this neural network, we get the label dog, and in this penultimate layer, it has information to the identification of dogs in general. Two images would be similar if they have similar representations in this penultimate layer. So we use two representations in this talk. So here's the first one, the same one as before. This has not been trained on task cancer cell identification at all. It's only used to identify dogs and cats and other everyday objects in ImageNet. On the other hand, supervised representation is the same network, but the last few layers are specifically tuned to identifying cancer and non-cancer cells. So this has special information about the task at hand. So these are our two representations, the unsupervised and the supervised. We can visualize these representations using Disney. Here's a supervised representation where the crosses are clearly segregated from the circles. The crosses are blast and the circles are non-blast. However, there is some amount of overlap. Overall, 96% of the closest neighbors belong to the same class. The unsupervised representation has a lot more overlap. It has little clusters though of cancer, the blast, and non-cancer regions. Only 80% of the closest neighbors belong to the same class. This is above chance, but it's still not perfect. So the algorithm that we're going to use is that for a given image, we look at the k decisions made on nearest neighbors and then take the modal decision as the modal response as the final decision on that image. We will be considering k is equal to 3 and k is equal to 7. So as a visualization of how the algorithm works, here is the same Disney representation of the supervised network. The crosses are blast cells and circles are non-blast cells. Red crosses is where the person got it right, that's the person said it was blast and it actually was blast. And blue circles is where the person said it was non-blast and actually was non-blast. But a blue cross such as this is where the person said it was non-blast, but the underlying cell is actually blast. However, looking at the neighbors, one can actually flip this non-blast to blast. Here's another example where the person where it actually won't work because the neighbors are also incorrect and they've incorrectly been identified as non-blast, but they actually are blast. So here similarity is not going to help us. So now as for our results, experiment 1A, we compare to average accuracy. We see that supervised k is equal to 3 actually beats it. In fact, supervised k is equal to 7 beats it even better. So the unsupervised network actually hurt performance, sadly. We've got the same set of findings for experiment 1B. However, for the experiment with the experts, we noticed that the supervised representation also does not improve accuracy. So here we've got an interesting set of findings where it seems to be working. That is only the supervised representation, and it only works for the novices and not for the experts. And the question that we might ask is why this might be. And one answer is that maybe experts get the same response on similar images. So therefore, actually looking at similar images is not going to fix an incorrect response, right? So we actually looked at the probability of same response on neighboring images. And as we can see for novice experiments, it's a lot lower than that of experts. So experts actually do give the same sort of response on on similar images. That is, even if they are incorrect, they are consistently incorrect in that part of the representational space. This sort of says that maybe experts are biased, while novices, with their mistakes, are a little, they have variance in their decisions. So now we just wanted to see if the unsupervised representation is still of some value, whether it could be used in some cases. So we have this unique data set where we have two responses on the same image. And we've got 34 novice participants. Again, these were undergraduates at Vanderbilt University, and they went through a brief training phase before going through the main trial. So in the first presentation of the image, the person was asked, is this a blast cell? And in the second presentation, in a technique called dialectic bootstrapping, the same image was rotated and the question was asked, is this a non-blast cell? So in similarity-based aggregation, we've got these two decisions on the same cell. If these two decisions are consistent, then the third decision won't be able to change it. But suppose these two decisions were actually inconsistent, different from each other, then looking at a similar image from the unsupervised representation might actually flip it around. So once again, we look at the k decisions on nearest neighbors and take the modal response as the final decision. So we consider k is equal to 3 and k is equal to 7. Now k is equal to 3 can only break ties. That is when we have inconsistent decisions on a given image. But k is equal to 7 can actually overturn decisions. As per our results, we see that supervised representation, as expected, does well. But the unsupervised representation, once again, can can break ties, can improve the performance significantly when it has to break ties, but it does not improve performance when decisions are overturned with k is equal to 7. So the conclusions that we have are rather straightforward with regards to the representation. First is that it works, the aggregation works well when the representation has actually been trained on the image at hand or on the task at hand, and that the number of neighbors that can be used actually depends on the quality of the representation. For a very good representation, using more neighbors is good, but for a bad representation, using more neighbors can actually hurt performance. And But with the unsupervised representation, it's nice to note that even if it was not trained on the task, it could still identify nearest neighbors that belong to the same class, and it could still effectively break ties and improve accuracy. So the supervised and unsupervised representations might be two ends of the spectrum. In real life scenarios, you might actually use representations that have a little more information than the unsupervised representation, but aren't as perfect as the one in the supervised representation. As for our decision processes, we again have an interesting set of findings. We just know that it works for novices and not experts. We already know that novices are more noisier than experts. So the errors that they make are a lot more random. So, but experts might make similar responses on similar cells. So, similarity based aggregation can denoise decision processes in a certain representational space. However, fixing errors from experts might need debiasing procedures and not just denoising procedures. Hence, interventions to improve accuracy for medical image decision making might be specific to the population and their decision making processes. Thank you.